Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, Illinois Arts Council Agency, and by the supportive viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to Illinois Stories. I'm Mark McDonald in Nauvoo. We rarely do a story twice, but last summer when we were here in June, the Flood Museum was getting ready to open, and I asked Robert Wright, who runs this operation, if we could come while they're setting up, while the construction was going on. He said, well, it's going to be a madhouse, but come on over if you want to. So we came over 3 weeks before they opened last summer and got a feeling for what it was going to take to put this thing together. And we were amazed that they opened on time in July. Now, all these months later, we're back to show you what the Flood Museum has become. And Robert, it's remarkable. Not only did you open on time, but through the summer and the fall, you had pretty good crowds.
We did.
And what you've done is you've been able to complete the experience rooms and the exhibit space that you were really wanting, right?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, it was a lot of work and really came together with a lot of help from people showing up at the last minute, coming from out west and everything, just all hands, everybody showing up to help.
Okay, why a flood museum?
Why a flood museum? Well, we want to tell the story of the flood in a way that people can understand that this is an event that actually happened. We talk about the fact that our purpose is not really to convince anybody who doesn't believe it happened, but it is to strengthen those who do. Mm-hmm. And so we wanted to gather all of the evidence and all the experiences into one place where people can come and have an experience with this story from the Bible and realize that it is not a disconnect with the science that's out there. And in fact, the science confirms the events that are recorded in the Bible perfectly. And so it was just to give us an opportunity to tell that in a way that people could really come and enjoy it as a family and have that great experience.
Yeah. And for those who aren't real familiar with the flood, this is Noah's
flood, yeah.
In which he built the ark, gathered the animals to save all the species for when the flood waters would go down and the earth could recontinue its flourishing.
Right, yeah. And the animals, what the scriptures tell us is that the animals of each kind came. And what we teach here in the museum and what we believe is that because of the God-given DNA that each of us has, it gives us the ability to adapt. And so the same thing happened with those animals, that as they came onto the ark and then went off after the flood, they had all the information they needed inside them to allow them to adapt and become all the species we see today.
When we go inside, you have six what you call experience rooms. And then you have various exhibit spaces of historical and biblical proportion. And so we're going to set that up inside, and we're going to get a little flavor of what each of these experiences are.
Sure.
And you'll walk us through the museum.
Yep, happy to.
Okay, thank you, sir. Let's go. Thank you, Robert. Okay, the first stop, there's sort of a room in here where you sort of get used to the idea and you learn a little bit, an overview of the flood.
Exactly.
But first of all, you're greeted by Noah and his wife, right?
Correct.
Which is a terrific way to start. Yep. And this room is called, the Common Ground?
Common Ground, correct. Yep.
And so what happens?
Well, when they come in, they'll be greeted, and then as we come around here, what we want to do is to have a foundation for the information that they're going to learn as they go through the experience rooms and the rest of the museum. We have realized, as we looked in cultures all over the world, that this is the most common story that appears in cultures all over the world. Everything from the Native Americans to the Mayans with their codex, and even on Easter Island, in Babylonia, Mesopotamia, at Angkor Wat, in China. It's everywhere. And of course, all of it has its variations from the flood account that occurs in the Bible. But if you think about the experience that people had as they left the Tower of Babel with the confusing of the languages, it's not unusual that then you would also have the confusing of the story. And what we have, thank goodness, is access to the account that was recorded by Moses, and this is a 400-year-old Torah scroll fragment that we have here that includes the Genesis account of the flood story. And because of that, we then are able to have the account that was recorded in the Bible. That's an actual page from the 1611 first edition of the King James, the portion in Genesis chapter 7 where Noah is talking about the flood. So here you get to see the presence of that story through artifacts in cultures all over the world.
And if you're not fortunate enough to have the museum director here, Robert, right, there's a video that plays here, which sort of describes what's in this room and sets up the your familiarity with this worldwide event.
Exactly. It gives you information about how the story could have become confused and corrupted, and then sets the stage for what's going to happen as you go through the rest of the museum kind of experience.
Well, let's enter the first experience.
Okay.
Okay, so this is one of the, it's a small theater is what it is.
Exactly.
With some benches for people to sit on. And what happens in the first experience?
In the first experience room, this is what we call Noah's world. So it's the world before the flood. The most common expectation that people have is the world before the flood was just like the world we live in now. But what we know from reading the Bible is that that's not the case. It's a very different world. And so in this room, we're trying to give people the experience and understand what that world was like and kind of set the tone for why did God decide that it was time to destroy all flesh from off the face of the earth. What were the events that led up to that? Why did that need to happen? And talk about what made Noah different from the people who didn't get on board the ark.
Okay, let's take a look.
Okay. In Genesis, the Bible describes the creation of the world and of the first man and woman. This first couple, Adam and Eve, inhabited a beautiful world where all their needs were met. It was an environment where there was complete harmony and peace. Suffering and death had not yet entered the world. God gave everything to Adam and Eve, but commanded them not to eat of one tree, the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Robert, the world was a very different place before the flood. We just learned that, haven't we?
Yep. And then, of course, the last thing that they experience here in this room is God telling them it's time to build an ark. And so now, in the next experience room, we take you inside the ark where you learn more about the ark.
Before you go there, how in the world did you manage to create these videos that tell these stories? Did you have a company that helped you make them? Did you make them? Did you write them?
I wrote them.
You wrote them?
Because they were based on the work that we had done for 6-8 years before when I wrote a book. And that was actually what led to creating the museum, was writing a book. And so as a result of that book and then needing to tell this story here, of course you don't have 300-400 pages, you've got 5-6 minutes. And so it was really a lot of prayerful time of saying, what is the message that needs to be communicated in this room and how do I tell that story? And so wrote the scripts first and then sat down and we built the videos ourselves. We thought we probably would have to hire somebody else, but I had done some video production in the past. I was a video and marketing guy. And so I said, well, we'll try it. And so we did this room first and decided we can do this. And so then the rest of the videos, we produced them all in-house.
Well, what we're going to see next is let's go build the ark, right?
Right.
Okay,
Yep. Building the ark.
Following you. This room looks different too.
Yeah, it does. This room is all clad in actual wood. So we tried to here actually build the ark, at least one room of it. It has cages for the animals. It has some of the materials that they would have had around and tools. And it's to help as you're sitting here learning about the ark. We felt it would help if you were actually in it, and if you could experience just for a minute maybe what it was like to be there. One element that stood out as the ark neared completion was the massive door. After all the animals were aboard, and Noah, his wife, his sons, and their wives were aboard, the door remained open. For 7 days they all sat on the ark. Anyone who wished could accept God's invitation to come to him and board his ark.
Experience number 3.
Yes, now you're inside the flood.
Inside the flood.
Yeah, you're going to actually be in the flood in this room. So we have special effects in here, everything from lightning, thunder. We tell everybody we're going to have lots of lightning and thunder, but we're not going to get you wet. And the kids
This
are
is
often
not Disney
disappointed.
World, right?
Yeah, the kids are disappointed, but yeah, that would be a little bit much. But we do have lighting that looks like water and all those type of things that all are happening as you're in this experience. So you're going through the flood, and we want people to have this understanding and this experience that this was not a pleasant ride. It's not like going out on the lake for the day.
And as we're going to see later too, a lot of people had this when we were growing up. We would see pictures in the books,
Right.
And the ark looked like a big boat, with the animals on top,
Sticking their heads out the windows and all that
It was kind of
stuff.
like a capsule.
It would have had to be when you consider how violent this event was, and water's pouring both from the sky, and it says the fountains of the deep opened up, so water coming from below and coming from above, and waves, and we know from the sediments that these waves would have been immense. And so, yes, you would need to have a vessel that was really, really capable of handling that kind of rough weather. So, yeah, it would have been more like you're inside and being protected. And that was the instructions that God gave Noah, as to how to build this thing. We talk about in the Ark Room that when God gives commands, he also gives instructions, thank goodness. And so he told him to build the ark, but then he told him how to build the ark too. And so here in this room, you have an opportunity to just sit here for a few minutes and think, what would that have been like? Yeah. The storm's raging outside, the waves are pounding, and you and your family are all that's left. And you are here, we know from the Bible, that they were there for over a year. So you're in this boat. Now the storm wasn't raging the whole time. Part of that, the waters were retreating. Yeah. But still, while the waves were going, it would have been a terrifying experience.
Well, let's ride out the flood.
Okay.
Tossing the ark to and fro. In the midst of the storm, they trusted and they prayed.
You call me out upon the waters, the great unknown.
Okay, we just rode out the flood.
Yep, we got through it.
It was a horrifying experience. Well, that's really what you want people to know.
Exactly.
That it's a topsy-turvy deal for a year. Yeah.
The only one you had to turn to was God. Yep.
So this is after the flood.
This is after the flood. So this would have been then the beginnings of the world that we live in now. So you would have had a world that was recovering from the flood. Of course, the average temperature of the sea would have been much warmer than it is now, so that would have resulted in more rain. So you would have had massive rainfall. You would have had ice and snow falling in the northern and southern parts of the planet, and so you would have had these great ice ages. And all of that is a result of the world recovering from this flood. And so you learn about that. You also learn in this room about how, as I mentioned before, that the animals had within them this DNA, this code that told them how to adapt to different environments. And we have some examples in the presentation here of how that has affected even astronauts in space, where their DNA actually changes because their environment is different, and how that relates to the animals being so adaptable as God designed them.
What about man?
Right,
what was going on with man at the time?
And with men, because we do talk in the video about how you would have had some men who now find themselves in climates and conditions where we now call them cavemen, because they're living just as people do today often in caves or in primitive conditions, while others are living in better environments and better climates, and so they build homes and even ultimately cities. But they're all still people, and that's what we know we're learning more and more about the artifacts they leave behind. These are people. They're people who are living in different environments, different circumstances, so they're having to adapt and adjust, but they're still just people.
Okay, after the flood.
After the flood.
Was helping him to adapt to the environment he was in, just as the animals adapted after the flood. And he often provides a token to remind us of the promises he has made. Come with us now to learn about the token given to Noah and to you, the rainbow.
Okay, what's our next stop, Robert?
And next we're going to go to the rainbow room. When people are in here, we tell them, follow the rainbow.
Okay, let's follow the rainbow. I'll take your word for it. Okay, we should be in the rainbow room.
Yes, this is the rainbow room. Yeah. Here you learn about rainbows, light, which of course is what creates rainbows, and how that light is so unique and how it exhibits particle and wave characteristics, and how that's kind of similar to us with our spirit and our body. And so we use this as an opportunity to teach about light and also teach about the rainbow, how it relates to us personally.
Well, the rainbow was significant too, wasn't it?
Yes.
Telling the flood story. In what way?
Well, at the end of the flood, and this is why we do it here after the flood, the rainbow was given to Noah, and it says in the Bible, to all flesh, as a token of this covenant that God had made, that he would never again destroy all flesh, and that just like in the flood, he had saved all humanity, that he would send his son, Jesus Christ, to then be an ark for each of us and save each of us.
Okay, after the rainbow, the promise. We get one more experience.
Yep, after the rainbow, we go into the promised room.
Into the promise.
And the promise is the room where we learn about how, just as the people after the flood, for generations could look and see the remains of this great ark there that reminded them that God is the one who had saved them through the flood, that we have an ark we can look to, and that's Jesus Christ. And so we tie it all together, and we explain that because we know from the evidence and from the scriptures that the flood actually happened, it should give us great confidence that the other events happened too, including Jesus Christ coming into the world. And so this is our opportunity to tie it all together and to direct people back to who it was that saved Noah and his family.
Okay, let's walk in.
Okay.
Accounts that confirm the miracle of the flood and God's deliverance also witness of the miracle of the resurrection of God's Son and the salvation it promises for each descendant of Adam, of Noah, and of all the families to come. It is your inheritance, the promise of the miracle.
Robert, we're looking at an artist's rendering of what the ark must have looked like based on what it had to go through to survive and for
Correct.
the people and the animals to survive.
Right.
And it's more like it's more like a floating tomb almost.
Yeah. It's a tight vessel. It would have to be able to sustain itself in all these waves and not be completely flooded out. This was painted by a local artist, Michael Bedard, who I didn't even know until we were building the museum that he has spent years of his life studying about Noah as well. And so this rendition of the ark is the result of a lot of study and contemplation by Michael in advance of printing it. And I also love it, or painting it. I also love it because the waves don't look friendly. And the skies don't look friendly.
It's a beautiful piece of work. It really is.
It's an amazing painting. He has been gracious enough to loan it to the museum to allow us to have it on display for everybody to see.
And it's funny what people will send you, isn't it? When they find out that you're working on a project that they like. This kind of showed up for you, didn't it?
It did.
And this is handmade by somebody who admires
exactly.
your work at the museum.
He has constructed ark reproductions for years. What's interesting about him, he actually has versions of this that he floats to see how they'll handle in the waves and everything, and he stirs it up. So he's pretty serious about it. And he then said, well, the biggest one I can ship is about 6 feet. So can I make you one and you put it in your museum? We said, certainly. Yeah. So, and then he opened up the side so you can see the animals
a little
inside.
cutout there for you?
Right.
That's very nice. And where's this guy from? Do you remember?
I think he's from South Carolina.
South Carolina.
Yep.
Okay. Let's walk back to your Bibles, because what you're really all about here at the Flood Museum is the biblical interpretation.
Yes.
And you can't very well do that unless you've got samples of the Bibles through the years. But this is a remarkable collection because you also had, and again, a sort of an anonymous person took an interest in what you were doing and had this remarkable collection of Bibles.
Right.
And helped you out because he knew you could display them.
Exactly. And we, of course, had a couple of Bibles, but nothing like this. And when he found out what we were doing, he actually had donated a number of Bibles and sold a number of Bibles to the Green family, the Hobby Lobby family, who built the Museum of the Bible in Washington, and they didn't need all the Bibles. And so he had some that he could make available to us, and it's just been great. And we organize them here a little different because I want to impress on people as well that America is a country that was founded on biblical principles. So we start actually with the 1792 Brown Bible, which is a subscription Bible. People would go around and collect subscriptions to print the Bible. And George Washington was one of the first subscribers. So the first president of the United States actually bought a Bible, and then the 82 Robert Aiken Bible was printed on order of Congress, so it's a congressional printing. But one of the most popular here, of course, is the 1853
And
Lincoln
that's this
Bible.
maroon-colored Bible.
Right.
What's the story behind that?
Well, when Lincoln arrived in Washington to be sworn in, his personal effects had not yet arrived, and so his family Bible wasn't there. And it was time to swear him in, and he didn't have a Bible. So the Supreme Court clerk ran to his desk, and this is a replica of the Bible that he had in his desk that he then brought out and Lincoln used to be sworn in. It was subsequently used by Barack Obama to be sworn in and by President Trump to be sworn in. So it's been used by 3 presidents, so we're really happy to have
just like that.
just like that one. Yep. Yep.
Okay, now these are also replicas, but they're very rare.
Yes.
Everybody's heard of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Well, I guess the largest of those was the Isaiah Scrolls.
Exactly. Right.
And you had, this is the complete collection,
Right.
and there aren't very many of these, are there?
No, there are only a few in the country. I'm only aware of 4 or 5 that are any place in the country. Even the one that is shown at the Shrine of the Book in Jerusalem is a replica just like this one. It was found in the first Qumran cave in 1947, and it is the most complete of any Old Testament book, and it's the most complete copy of the book of Isaiah that was found in Qumran. And of course, it's one of the most significant books in the Old Testament.
And this is in Hebrew.
In Hebrew.
So not everybody can read it, but
Exactly.
you have helped out by some of the famous Isaiah
Exactly.
quotes that are
Yes.
chapters that are.
Yeah, I did the translations here, and there are a couple of places where it might vary on one word from our current Old Testament, and so those are pointed out. But what it does is give us confidence that the book of Isaiah that we read in our scriptures today is the book that was written by the prophet Isaiah. There was a lot of concern that maybe through the years the scribes had inserted things or taken things out or made mistakes. And what we see from this, which dates from over 2,000 years ago, is that that was not likely the case.
You know, we were talking about people making contributions. You have a recent one from a man in Rushville. And,
Exactly.
and I want to see some of that. Can we go downstairs and look at that?
Let's do that.
Okay.
Yep.
Robert, you got a remark on this. At least tell us what this is.
Well, this is a T-Rex skull. It was actually one that was discovered at Black Hills Institute in South Dakota. It is now at the Smithsonian. We were lucky enough to receive this cast from Scott Taylor in St. Louis. And so we get to have him here with us.
Wow. Okay. So people would see the same thing in the Smithsonian as
Exactly.
they here
Yep.
in the Flood
This is
Museum
a-
in Nauvoo.
It's a museum
That's terrific.
cast. Yep.
We talked about the Rushville man, and this fella.
Yes.
I don't think he'd mind if we mentioned Robert
Woodruff, right.
He has a collection. Kept his whole life of things that he had found in central Illinois that go through the centuries, right?
Exactly, yeah. He had this collection. He called us and said, I want to make this contribution to your museum. If you come and pick it up. And we got there and couldn't believe all the stuff that he had found right there on his own property. And so we have it. We're still working on finishing up the exhibit, but it's evidence of the global flood in Illinois. And so we think it's really, really an interesting, fun thing for people to realize this is the stuff that's right in their backyard.
Boy, it really is interesting. Robert, why beating on this log 3 times? What was that about?
Ancient tradition says that Noah was told to build a bell just like this, what's now called a cimatron, out of boxwood, and to ring it 3 times every day. In the morning to call the people to work, and in the noontime to tell them to go and eat, and at the evening to tell them to be done for the day.
To rest.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
And that is exactly the size that he
same
prescribed.
size. Yep.
isn't
He
it?
told them to build it 3 cubits by 1.5 cubits. That's what that is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Robert, thank you so much
Thank
for the
you.
visit. It's been terrific. The Flood Museum is only open 1 day a week during the winter. It's on Saturday. However, if you have a group that would like to go through, they encourage that you call and they'll be glad to accommodate you. And then starting in May, they'll be open 6 days a week, and there is an admission. With another Illinois story in Nauvoo, I'm Mark McDonald. Thanks for watching.
Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, Illinois Arts Council Agency, and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you.